The planet of Vera was once full of music, light, and freedom. Rivers sang across open valleys, and towers of crystal stood in harmony with the sky. But those days were long gone. The Empire had come, bringing iron ships and fire. They conquered without mercy, crushing voices, burning dreams, and leaving behind silence where songs once lived. In the dark corners of the Empire's strongholds, prisoners filled the cells, men, women, and children from different worlds. Among them was a girl named Lyra. She was young, but her eyes carried the weight of ages. Her skin was pale silver, glowing faintly in the dim light, and her hair, once long and shimmering like moonlight, was cut short and tangled. Around her wrists were heavy chains, the metal biting into her skin. She had worn them for so long that she no longer remembered the feeling of freedom. The guards treated her and others like tools, not people. They were ordered to work until they collapsed, and when they fell, they were beaten or ignored. Lyra had grown used to pain. She had grown used to hunger, thirst, and the cruel laughter of those who ruled over her. But what she had never grown used to was the emptiness inside her, the emptiness that came from losing hope. She had once dreamed of becoming a singer in her village. She remembered standing by the river, singing to the stars, her family cheering for her. That dream was gone now, broken into dust. Every day she whispered to herself, "Do not hope, Lyra. Hope only hurts." The prison camp was always the same. The sky was hidden by steel walls. The air smelled of smoke and sweat. The sound of chains clinking was endless. Lyra sat quietly in her corner, her head bowed, pretending to sleep even when she was awake. It was safer not to draw attention. If the guards thought she was weak, they left her alone. If they thought she was strong, they beat her harder. One day, everything changed. That morning, the prisoners were lined up in the yard. The sun was weak, filtered through the Empire's thick smoke. Guards shouted at the rows, pointing at the smallest mistakes. Lyra kept her head down, clutching the chain around her wrist, trying to stay invisible. But then she noticed someone new. A tall figure walked into the yard, wearing the uniform of the Empire's soldiers. His steps were firm and his shadow stretched long across the ground. His face was strange, different from the others. His skin was not pale or scaled like the guards. His eyes were sharp, deep brown, and carried something rare, something she had not seen in years. It was not cruelty. It was not mockery. It was awareness. The man was human. The Empire had soldiers from many worlds under its command, each forced to serve. But humans were different. They were known for being stubborn, unpredictable, and sometimes dangerous even to the Empire itself. Still, they were used as soldiers because they fought harder than most. Lyra tried not to look at him, but her curiosity betrayed her. She lifted her eyes for just a moment and their gazes met. It was only for a second, but in that second she felt something shift inside her chest. His eyes did not see a prisoner or dirt or a tool. His eyes saw her. The chains around her wrists suddenly felt heavier, as if ashamed to be there under his gaze. The guard next to him barked orders. The human, whose name she would later learn was Captain Marcus Hale, did not react. He nodded, pretending to follow, but his eyes kept drifting back to the prisoners, especially her. Lyra returned to her cell that night with her heart strangely restless. She told herself it meant nothing. The human was just curious, nothing more. Still, for the first time in years, she replayed the memory of a single glance over and over in her head. The next day, she saw him again. Marcus walked through the camp with steady steps, his hand always on his weapon, his eyes scanning the surroundings. But whenever he passed her, his gaze softened almost imperceptibly. Later, during the work shift, she collapsed from exhaustion. The ground was rough and the chain cut deeper into her wrist as she fell. Normally, the guards would have struck her or dragged her like an animal. But before they could, Marcus stepped forward. "Leave her," he said simply. His voice was calm, commanding in a way that made the other guards hesitate. One of them laughed. "She's weak, worthless." Marcus turned his head slightly. His eyes narrowed, and though his expression barely changed, there was a weight in his silence. The other guards looked away and muttered curses, but they obeyed. For the first time, Lyra was not punished for falling. She looked up at Marcus, confused. His face gave away nothing, but as he turned to leave, his eyes flickered with something she could not name. It was not pity. It was not disgust, it was respect. Days passed, and little moments like this kept happening. When food was thrown carelessly at the prisoners, Marcus made sure a small portion landed near her. When the guards tightened her chains too much somehow, they were loosened later. When she was too tired to carry her load, a small nod from Marcus kept the other guards distracted just long enough for her to catch her breath. Lyra's mind spun with questions. Why is he doing this? What does he want from me? She had learned that kindness was a lie, a trick used to break prisoners further. Yet this felt different. There was no cruelty hiding beneath his actions. He did not demand anything in return. One evening, when the camp was quiet, Marcus walked near her cell. The guards were busy gambling in another corner, their laughter echoing through the metal halls. Marcus stopped in front of the bars, his shadow falling over her. "You," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "What is your name?" Lyra's heart pounded. No one had asked her name in years. She swallowed, her throat dry. "Lyra," she whispered. He nodded. "Lyra, I will remember." He did not stay long. He did not promise anything. But to her, those simple words were like water in a desert. Someone had spoken her name. Someone had reminded her that she was more than a prisoner, more than chains, more than dirt. That night she could not sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, whispering her own name again and again. For the first time it felt real. The days grew heavier, but her spirit no longer felt completely broken. She began to notice small details she had ignored before. The warmth of sunlight sneaking through cracks in the wall, the rhythm of footsteps echoing in the corridors, the quiet strength in her own breathing. And every time she saw Marcus, she felt something rising inside her. Something dangerous, perhaps, something she had buried long ago. It was hope. This was only the beginning. The Empire still stood tall, its chains still wrapped tightly around her wrists. But deep in her heart, Lyra sensed that something had changed forever. She was no longer invisible. She was no longer alone. Somewhere in this place of smoke and steel, one human soldier had seen her. And because he had seen her, she felt a spark of strength return. The days in the prison camp were long and heavy, like endless chains dragging behind every step. Lyra's body grew weaker with each sunrise, but her mind began to feel strangely restless. Something was stirring inside her, something she had thought was lost forever. It was not much, just a flicker like the glow of a dying ember. But it was there. The ember was Marcus. The human soldier walked among the guards every day, his face calm, his voice steady, his actions precise. To others, he was just another officer of the Empire, but to her, he was something more. She had seen the way his eyes softened when they looked at her. She had noticed the way his silence protected her, the way his presence shielded her from harsher blows. It was not love. It was not friendship, not yet. It was simply a truth. Marcus did not see her as dirt, and that alone was enough to make her feel alive again. That evening, the prisoners were herded into the dining hall. The hall was nothing but a wide metal room with broken lamps and long tables. The guards usually threw stale bread and thin soup at them, laughing as the weak scrambled for scraps. Lyra usually stayed quiet, taking only what was left. But that night, something different happened. As the guards shouted and pushed the prisoners forward, Marcus stood at the back of the hall, watching. His hand rested on the strap of his weapon, but he did not move. When a guard shoved Lyra too hard and her bowl fell to the floor, spilling the little food she had, Marcus's eyes narrowed. The guard smirked and turned away. Normally, that would have been the end. But Marcus stepped forward, picked up the fallen bowl and quietly refilled it himself. Then he placed it on the table near her. No one spoke. The room fell silent for a moment, the prisoners staring in disbelief. A soldier serving food to a prisoner? Such a thing had never happened before. Marcus did not look at her directly, but his voice was firm when he spoke. "Eat." The guards laughed nervously, as if unsure whether to mock him or stay quiet. In the end, they chose silence. Marcus's presence carried a weight that was hard to challenge. Lyra's hands trembled as she touched the bowl. Her heart raced. It was only food, plain soup, hard bread, but to her it was more than a meal. It was proof that someone, even in this place of cruelty, still remembered what kindness meant. She whispered softly, "Thank you." Marcus did not answer. He simply turned and walked away, but she saw the faintest nod as he left. That night, back in her cell, Lyra stared at the ceiling. The taste of the bread lingered on her tongue, but it was not the food that filled her, it was the memory of his act. Why? She wondered. Why does he help me? What does he gain? The Empire was built on power, fear, and control. No one gave without taking more in return. Yet Marcus had given her something without asking for anything. The thought made her chest ache in a way she did not understand. For the first time in years, she dreamed not of chains but of voices, her family's laughter, the songs of her village, and the steady, firm voice of Marcus telling her to eat. The following day she was taken to the yard again. The work was brutal, lifting heavy stones, carrying supplies, digging trenches for new structures the Empire demanded. Lyra's arms shook, her body weak from years of starvation and beatings. She staggered under the weight of a stone until her knees buckled. The guard raised his whip, ready to strike her down. But before it could fall, Marcus's hand caught it mid-air. The guard froze, eyes wide. Marcus's voice was cold but calm. Enough, she will continue. No need to waste strength on punishment. The guard hesitated, then stepped back, muttering curses under his breath. Marcus released the whip and walked away as if nothing had happened. But to Lyra, everything had changed. She struggled back to her feet, her breathing heavy. Her chains rattled, but for the first time she felt that the sound was not only of her suffering. It was the sound of resistance, quiet but alive. When her eyes met Marcus's from across the yard, he gave the smallest nod. It was as if he was saying, "Stand, do not give in." And she did. Later that night, Marcus appeared near her cell again. The guards were lazy after their evening drinks, their laughter echoing down the halls. Marcus stood in the shadows, close enough for her to hear, but far enough not to draw attention. "You are stronger than you think," he said quietly. Lyra blinked. His words pierced through her like light through darkness. She shook her head slowly. "No, I am weak. I was strong once before the chains. But now," her voice cracked. "Now I am nothing." Marcus leaned closer, his voice steady. "That is what they want you to believe. But I saw you today. You stood again even when your body was failing. That is not weakness. That is strength." Her eyes filled with tears. She quickly turned her face away, ashamed. But Marcus did not mock her. He did not laugh or scold. He simply waited in silence, letting her breathe. Finally, she whispered, "Why do you help me?" There was a pause. Then his answer came, quiet but firm. "Because no one deserves chains, not you." Not anyone, her heart pounded. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust him. But trust was dangerous. It could be shattered, leaving only pain. Yet something in his voice told her he was different. She closed her eyes and whispered, "I don't know if I can be strong again." Marcus's reply was soft, but it carried the weight of truth. "Then borrow my strength, until you find your own." From that night on, things began to change. Marcus found ways to help her secretly. He slipped her extra food when the guards weren't watching. He loosened her chains enough so that her wounds could heal. He even began to teach her, small lessons disguised as casual words. "Breathe steady when you lift. It makes the weight easier. Watch their movements. A guard's eyes will tell you what his hands plan to do. Never let them see fear. Even if you feel it, hide it. Fear feeds them." At first, Lyra thought she could not follow his words. Her body was too frail, her spirit too broken. But slowly she began to notice the difference. Her hands grew steadier, her steps firmer. When the guards tried to mock her, she no longer lowered her gaze. She met their eyes, silent but unbroken. The other prisoners began to notice too. They whispered about her in the corners of the yard, wondering how she still had strength when so many others had given up. They did not know the truth, that her strength was borrowed from the human who had chosen to see her as more than dirt. One evening, after another brutal day, Marcus approached her cell again. His face was calm as always, but his eyes carried something deeper, something heavy. "Lyra," he said quietly, "one day this place will fall. The Empire cannot last forever. But when that day comes, you must be ready. You must stand not just for yourself, but for others too." Her heart trembled at his words. She had never thought beyond survival. She had never dared imagine a world where the Empire's chains were broken. But Marcus spoke as if it were not just possible, but certain. She looked at him through the bars, her voice shaking. "Why me? I am no leader. I am just broken." Marcus's eyes softened. "Because the broken who rise are stronger than those who have never fallen. You know pain. You know loss. That makes you powerful in ways others cannot understand. When you rise, others will rise with you." For a long moment, silence filled the cell. Then slowly, Lyra placed her hand on the cold bars. Her chains clinked softly. "Maybe," she whispered. "Maybe I can try." Marcus nodded. "That is all I ask." That night, Lyra did not feel empty. For the first time in years, her dreams were not of silence, but of fire, fire that burned chains, fire that lit the dark, and at the center of that fire was a human soldier who had given her something priceless. Not freedom, not yet, but the strength to hope, the strength to believe, the strength to stand again. The prison camp was a world of shadows and steel, where the weak were crushed and the strong were chained until they broke. For most prisoners, each day was the same as the last, a slow march into despair. But for Lyra, the days had begun to change. She still wore chains. She still carried heavy stones, still endured the cruel commands of the guards. But now she carried something else too. Words whispered in the dark. Words that refused to leave her mind. "Borrow my strength until you find your own." Those words, spoken by Marcus, lived inside her like a flame hidden in her chest. It was small, but it burned against the coldness of the Empire. One night, when the camp grew silent and the guards were distracted with their drinks, Marcus returned to her cell. He carried no weapon, no lantern, only his steady presence. His eyes flickered with caution as he glanced down the corridor. "Tonight," he whispered, "we begin." Lyra blinked, confused. "Begin what?" "Training," he answered simply. Her heart raced. "Training? For what? Escape? Battle?" She almost laughed at the thought. She was weak, half-starved, with wrists raw from chains. What could she possibly train for? But Marcus's eyes left no room for doubt. He crouched low, slipping a small piece of broken wood through the bars. "Hold it," he said. She stared at it, hesitant. It was nothing but a stick, smooth from years of weathering. Yet when she wrapped her fingers around it, Marcus nodded. "Good," he said. "Now lift it. Both hands." As if it were a weapon, her hand shook. The stick felt heavier than it should, but she obeyed, lifting it clumsily. Marcus studied her posture. "Not bad, again, and again." They repeated the motion until her arms trembled, until sweat dripped down her brow. She wanted to stop, but every time she faltered, Marcus's calm voice guided her back. "Breathe steady. Straighten your back. Focus on balance, not force." By the time the guards stumbled back from their drinking hall, Marcus was gone and Lyra was left in her cell with trembling arms. Yet her heart was stronger than it had been before. The nights that followed were the same. Marcus would come when the camp was quiet, teaching her in secret. He showed her how to grip a stick like a blade, how to step lightly instead of stumbling, how to watch an enemy's shoulders for the sign of a strike. At first, she was clumsy. The chains made her movements awkward, and her body was weak from years of suffering. She dropped the stick often, cursing her own weakness. But Marcus never raised his voice, never mocked her. He only said, "Again," so she tried again. And again, and again. Days turned to weeks. Her arms grew stronger, her steps steadier. She began to sense her own body again, to feel the muscles that had once been strong before the Empire had broken her. For the first time since her capture, Lyra felt like she was becoming herself again, not the helpless girl in chains, but the daughter of Vera who had once dreamed of singing to the stars. One evening, as the prisoners returned from work, Lyra stumbled with her load of stones. The guard raised his hand to strike, but she did not cower. She straightened her back, meeting his eyes. Her chains clinked as she set the stones down with quiet dignity. The guard hesitated, unsettled by the fire in her eyes. He struck anyway, but the blow landed less harshly than before. Lyra did not fall. She did not cry. She stood, and from across the yard, Marcus watched with the faintest hint of pride in his expression. But strength always came with danger. One night, as Marcus and Lyra practiced quietly in her cell, a shadow appeared at the end of the corridor. A guard, half drunk, had wandered close. His eyes narrowed as he saw Marcus slip the stick into her hands. "What's this?" The guard sneered. "Teaching the dirt tricks, human? Planning something?" Marcus froze. Lyra's heart pounded in terror. If they were discovered, Marcus would be punished, or worse, executed for treason. And she would suffer for dragging him into this. The guard stepped closer, his voice cruel. "I'll make sure the commander hears about this." Before Marcus could react, Lyra spoke. Her voice was sharp, desperate. "No, he wasn't teaching me. He was mocking me. He gave me the stick and told me to pretend I was strong, to laugh at me. The guard raised an eyebrow, suspicious. He looked at Marcus, then at her. Finally, he burst into laughter. A cruel joke, eh? I like it. Maybe you're not as soft as you look, human. With that, the guard staggered away, still chuckling. Marcus exhaled slowly. Lyra dropped the stick, her hands trembling. You saved me, Marcus whispered. She shook her head quickly. No, I saved both of us. I won't let them take you. For a moment, silence filled the cell. Their eyes met and something unspoken passed between them. A bond forged not by words, but by trust. The next day, punishment came anyway. The guard, though drunk, must have told others. Lyra was dragged into the yard and chained to the post, the sun burning above her. She was left there without food or water, her body aching from exhaustion. The guards laughed, calling her worthless. Try to look strong now, they mocked. Marcus could do nothing. To intervene openly would mean death. So he stood among the soldiers, his face calm, his eyes burning with silent fury. Lyra's body screamed with pain, but she remembered his words. Never let them see fear. So she did not cry. She did not scream. She stood in silence, her chains rattling in the wind. Hours passed. Her throat was dry, her legs weak, but she refused to collapse. She clung to Marcus's lessons, to his faith in her. When the guards finally released her, she fell to her knees but lifted her head high. The prisoners watching from the shadows saw something they had not seen in years, a prisoner who endured without breaking. That night, Marcus came to her cell. His voice was tight with anger. I am sorry. I could not stop them. But Lyra shook her head weakly. You gave me strength to endure. That was enough. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. I am not broken. Not anymore. Marcus's eyes softened. No, you are not. From that day, whispers spread through the prison. Prisoners spoke of the silver-skinned girl who had defied the guards without tears. They began to watch her, to follow her movements, to take courage from her defiance. Lyra did not yet see herself as a leader. She was still weak, still scarred, but she no longer felt like dirt. She no longer felt invisible. She was changing, and the Empire, though it did not yet realize it, had planted the seed of its own rebellion, because it had failed to break her, because a human had given her strength. That night, as she lay in her cell, her wrists raw from chains, Lyra whispered to herself, I will stand. I will rise. The words echoed in her heart like a song, and Marcus, standing in the shadows outside, allowed himself a rare smile. The spark had been lit. The prison camp of Vera was meant to be unbreakable. The Empire's steel walls rose like cliffs, guarded by towers of fire and watchful eyes. Countless prisoners had tried to flee before, but none had succeeded. Those who failed were dragged back in chains, broken beyond recognition. Lyra knew all of this. She knew the risks, the dangers, the certainty of death. Yet for the first time in years, she felt something stronger than fear. She felt determination. It was Marcus who gave her that strength. His quiet training, his whispered lessons, his belief in her, it had all led to this night. Tonight, Marcus said, standing in the shadows of her cell, we leave. Lyra's breath caught. She stared at him, her heart pounding. Leave, you mean? Escape? Yes. His voice was steady, but his eyes revealed the weight of his choice. If we stay, you will die in chains. If we try, we may die free, but I will not let you remain here any longer. Her hands trembled. The thought of freedom was almost too large to grasp. She wanted to believe it, to hold on to it, but fear pressed hard against her chest. They will catch us, she whispered. The walls, the guards, the machines. Marcus shook his head. I have watched them. I know their patterns, their weaknesses. There is a way out, through the supply tunnels beneath the eastern wall. If we move at the right time, we can reach the forest beyond. Lyra's chains rattled as she clenched her fists. And if we fail? Marcus's eyes softened. Then we fall together. But better to fall in hope than to live in despair. For a long moment, silence filled the cell. Then Lyra nodded slowly. Her voice was quiet but firm. I will follow. The plan began with patience. They waited until the guards grew drunk in the hall, their laughter echoing like thunder. Marcus unlocked her chains with a stolen key, the metal falling to the ground with a soft clink. For the first time in years, her wrists were free. Lyra stared at her bare skin, pale and scarred. She touched the marks where the chains had dug into her flesh, and her chest tightened. It felt unreal, like stepping into a dream. Marcus noticed her trembling. "Do not be afraid. Those scars are proof of your strength, not your weakness." She looked at him and nodded. Together they moved through the shadows, slipping past sleeping guards and silent corridors. The camp, usually filled with noise, seemed unnervingly quiet. Every step echoed in her ears. Every shadow felt like an enemy waiting to strike. At last they reached the entrance to the supply tunnels. Marcus pulled away a loose grate and motioned for her to crawl inside. The tunnel was narrow and damp, the air heavy with dust. Lyra's hands scraped against the rough stone as she crawled, but she did not stop. Marcus followed close behind, his presence steady and reassuring. They moved for what felt like hours, the tunnel winding beneath the camp. At times Lyra's arms ached and her chest burned, but Marcus's quiet encouragement pushed her forward. "Keep moving," he whispered. "Every step takes us closer." Finally, a faint breeze touched her face. Lyra's heart leapt. Light shone faintly ahead, seeping through cracks in the stone. The exit. But as they neared, a sudden noise froze them in place. The clatter of boots, the hiss of machinery. Marcus cursed under his breath. "They've increased patrols. They must have noticed something." Through the cracks above, Lyra saw the glow of searchlights sweeping across the yard. Guards shouted orders, their weapons gleaming in the dark. Marcus's jaw tightened. "We'll have to fight our way out." Lyra's blood ran cold. "Fight? I can't." "Yes, you can." His voice was sharp, urgent. "Remember what I taught you. Breathe steady. Balance, not force. You are stronger than you know." She shook her head, fear rising like a storm inside her. But then she saw his eyes, calm, unshaken, filled with faith in her. Slowly, she steadied her breath. "I will try," she whispered. The grate opened with a groan, and they stepped into the night. The air was cool, the sky filled with stars, but there was no time to admire it. Guards spotted them instantly, shouts ringing through the camp. "Prisoner escaping. Stop them." Searchlights blazed. Sirens wailed. The ground shook as machines roared to life. Marcus grabbed a broken pipe from the ground and held it like a weapon. "Stay behind me." But Lyra shook her head, grabbing a length of chain that had once bound her. She wrapped it around her hands, her eyes blazing. "No, I fight too." Marcus gave the faintest smile. "Good." The first guard charged, weapon raised. Marcus struck quickly, the pipe knocking the guard to the ground. Another lunged at Lyra, and instinct took over. She swung the chain with all her strength, the metal striking the guard's arm. He staggered back, shocked. Her breath came fast, her heart pounding, but she did not freeze. She struck again, harder this time, her chain singing through the air. More guards poured in, shouting, firing blasts of energy. Marcus moved like a storm, blocking and striking, his every step calculated. Lyra fought beside him, clumsy at first, but growing steadier with every blow. For the first time, she felt power in her hands. Not the power of cruelty, but the power of choice. She was no longer chained. She was no longer dirt. She was fighting for freedom. But freedom always came at a price. As they neared the outer wall, a blast of energy struck Marcus's side. He stumbled, blood seeping through his uniform. "Marcus," Lyra cried, rushing to his side. He gritted his teeth, forcing himself upright. "Keep moving." "Don't stop," she shook her head desperately. "I won't leave you." His hand pressed against hers, firm and steady. "Then you must lead." "Take me with you. You are ready, Lyra. More ready than you know." Tears blurred her vision, but she obeyed. She slipped her arm under his, supporting his weight as they pushed forward. Every step was agony, but she refused to fall. The gates loomed ahead, guarded by machines with glowing eyes. For a moment it seemed impossible, but then Lyra tightened her grip on the chains in her hands. She swung them with all her strength, striking the machine's eye. Sparks flew, the machine collapsing in a shower of smoke. The prisoners who had been watching from their cells began to shout, their voices rising in a chorus of hope. "Run, run!" Lyra's heart blazed with fire. She dragged Marcus through the gates, her chains striking down any who dared block their way. And then, freedom. They stumbled into the forest beyond the walls, the trees towering high, the night air fresh and alive. Lyra collapsed to her knees, Marcus falling beside her. For a moment, silence filled the world. No chains, no guards, only the sound of the wind through the leaves. Lyra stared at her wrists, scarred but free. She lifted her head to the sky, the stars shining above. Tears streamed down her face, but this time they were not of pain. They were of triumph. "We're free," she whispered. "We're free." Marcus lay back against the ground, his breathing heavy, but a faint smile curved his lips. Yes, he said softly. You are free, and you are strong. She gripped his hand tightly, her voice steady. We are strong. And for the first time, Lyra truly believed it. That night beneath the stars, Lyra was no longer the girl who had been chained and treated like dirt. She was a survivor, a fighter, a spark of rebellion. And though the Empire still stood tall, its chains heavy and unyielding, a new force had been born inside her heart, and in the bond she shared with a human who had given her the strength to rise. The escape was only the beginning. The forest stretched wide and endless, its branches whispering with the night wind. For the first time in years, Lyra breathed air that was not heavy with smoke and chains. The stars above seemed brighter, freer, like they were celebrating her escape. But freedom came with a price. Marcus lay against the roots of an old tree, his breath shallow, his side wounded from the enemy's blast. His face was pale, yet his eyes were steady as always. You did it, he whispered with a faint smile. You led us through. Lyra held his hand tightly, her voice trembling. I would never have made it without you. He shook his head slowly. No, Lyra. You were always stronger than you believed. I only reminded you. The days that followed were not easy. They built a small shelter deep in the forest, away from the patrols searching for them. Marcus's wound healed slowly, though he remained weak. Lyra cared for him, using herbs she found in the wild and water from the stream. At first she thought survival would be enough. But one night as they sat by a small fire, Marcus spoke words that changed everything. Lyra, he said softly, we cannot hide forever. The Empire will not stop. They will keep taking, keep chaining. There are others out there suffering as you once did. They need hope. They need a leader. Lyra's heart pounded. A leader? You mean me? Marcus nodded. Yes, you. You carry the scars of their cruelty and the strength of survival. You can be the voice they follow. She stared at the flames, her thoughts heavy. But I am only one person. What can I do against an empire? Marcus's eyes shone with quiet determination. One spark can burn down a forest. One voice can awaken 1,000. You are that spark, Lyra. The next morning she rose with new purpose. She began to move through the villages hidden beyond the Empire's walls. At first the people looked at her with fear, their eyes hollow, their spirits broken. But when she showed them the scars on her wrists and told them how she escaped, something shifted. You are not alone, she said to them. We are stronger than their chains. Together we can rise. Her words spread like fire through dry grass. One by one the villagers whispered her story. The chained girl who fought back. The girl who escaped with the help of a human. The people began to gather. Farmers, laborers, former prisoners all came to listen. They had no weapons but their courage, no armor but their will. Yet when they stood together, they looked less like victims and more like an army waiting to be born. Marcus guided her, though his strength was fading. He taught her how to lead, how to plan, how to inspire, not with fear but with hope. Do not rule them, he advised. Stand beside them. Show them that you are one of them, not above them. Lyra listened, learning with every step. She spoke to her people not as a commander, but as a sister. She fought beside them, trained with them, and shared their hunger and their victories. Slowly they began to see her not just as Lyra, the escaped prisoner, but as a leader, someone who could guide them toward freedom. The Empire soon learned of the growing rebellion. Patrols swept the villages searching for her. Towers of fire lit the night skies, warning of danger. One evening a scout returned to their camp breathless. They know your name now, Lyra. The commanders speak of you as a threat. They call you the Chainbreaker. Lyra's heart raced at the title. For years she had been dirt beneath their boots. Now the Empire itself feared her, but fear alone could not win a war. The Empire had weapons, machines, and soldiers trained for battle. Lyra's people had only courage. She stood before them, her voice steady though her heart trembled. We cannot fight them with strength alone, but we can fight with unity. We know their lands better than they do. We know their weaknesses. If we stand together, we will not fall. And so the rebellion began. At night, they struck the Empire's supply lines, stealing food and weapons. During the day, they freed prisoners from camps, swelling their numbers with grateful survivors. Everywhere they went, hope spread. Lyra led the charge, her chains wrapped around her arms like a symbol of both her suffering and her strength. Her people followed, shouting her name, their spirits ignited. The Empire responded with greater force, sending entire battalions to crush the rebellion. Battles raged across forests, rivers, and ruined towns. Many lives were lost, but for every fallen rebel, 2 more rose to take their place. The oppressed had finally found their voice, and it was Lyra's. Through it all, Marcus remained by her side. Though his body weakened, his mind stayed sharp. He guided her strategies, reminded her of compassion when anger clouded her judgment, and stood as her anchor when doubt threatened to drown her. One night, after a hard-fought victory, Lyra sat beside him under the stars. "You gave me strength when I had none," she said softly. "Without you, I would still be chained." Marcus smiled faintly. "And now you give strength to others. That is the way of it. Each light passes to another." His words sank deep into her heart. The rebellion grew, and soon whispers reached the Empire's capital itself. The Emperor, furious, ordered his generals to crush Lyra and her followers once and for all. The final battle came on a stormy night. The Empire's army marched with thunder in their boots, their machines roaring like beasts. But Lyra's people stood firm, their torches blazing in the dark. Lyra stepped forward, her chains clutched in her hands. She looked at her people and raised her voice so all could hear. "We are no longer slaves. We are no longer dirt beneath their feet. We are free, and we will fight for that freedom until the stars themselves fade." Her words rolled across the battlefield like thunder. The rebels roared in answer, their voices shaking the air. And then, the battle began. The fight was fierce and unrelenting. The Empire's machines struck hard, but the rebels used the land to their advantage, striking from shadows and breaking the enemy's lines. Lyra fought at the front, her chains moving like lightning, striking down soldiers who underestimated her. She moved not with fear, but with purpose, every blow a promise to her people, every strike a memory of the chains she once bore. Through the chaos, she felt Marcus's eyes on her, steady and proud. At last, after hours of struggle, the Empire's forces began to falter. Their lines broke, their machines toppled, and their soldiers fled. The rebels stood victorious. Silence fell across the battlefield, broken only by the cries of the wounded and the crackle of fire. Lyra stood among her people, her chains heavy in her hands, her chest heaving with exhaustion. "We did it," someone whispered. "No," Lyra said, her voice soft but clear. "You did it. Together we broke their chains." Her people cheered, their voices rising like a storm of joy. For the first time in generations, they were free. But victory came with sorrow. When Lyra returned to Marcus, she found him leaning against a tree, his strength nearly gone. His eyes met hers, filled with peace. "You led them," he whispered. "You gave them hope." Tears filled her eyes as she knelt beside him. "Because of you, Marcus. You gave me strength when I was nothing." He shook his head gently. "You were never nothing. You were always more. I only helped you see it." His hand gripped hers one last time. "Now the future is yours, Lyra. Guide them well." With those words, his eyes closed and his breathing slowed until it was no more. Lyra's tears fell freely, but she did not cry out. She lifted her head to the sky, the stars shining bright, and whispered, "I will not fail you." In the days that followed, the rebellion grew into something greater. Villages united, chains were broken, and the Empire's grip weakened across the land. Lyra led not as a ruler, but as a symbol of hope. The people called her many names: the Chainbreaker, the Star of the Free, but she never forgot the human who had given her strength. Every night, she looked at the stars and remembered his words. One spark can awaken 1,000, and so, Lyra carried the spark forward not just for herself, but for all who had once been chained. Her journey was far from over. The Empire still loomed, powerful and cruel, but now the oppressed had a leader, and hope burned brighter than ever. Lyra was no longer the girl who was chained and treated like dirt. She was a leader, a warrior and a voice of freedom, and the galaxy itself would never be the same.